Thank you, Mark, for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us.
Thank you, Matthew. Thanks, everyone. So I'm a lawyer. I've been working in condominium law, real estate, and development law for the past 10 years. And I thought it'd be a good idea for those who are interested in condominiums or you've already had some exposure to condominiums to know how the process works. And so the purpose of this presentation is to just give an overview of how you create and sell a condominium. So these are the items I'm going to go through. They're roughly in chronological order for what the process is. And we're going to start with the understanding that you have a piece of land, you have some idea of what you want to build, and your end goal is to condominiumize it and sell it off to end buyers. So how do you do that? So first, you have to decide why a condominium? Why are you going through this process? And before deciding that, I think the question is, what is a condominium? So first, there's the condominium plan. That's essentially a plan of a way of subdividing land. It's a plan that divides the land that you have as one parcel into units and common elements. The units are owned, and those owners own a common interest in the common elements that they share together. The condominium corporation, it's a creature of statute. It's created by the Condominium Act when the condominium plan, being the description plans, and the declaration are registered. That creates the corporation. Its sole purpose is to administer those lands and those who occupy and own those lands. And so it creates a lot of powers that you wouldn't have through contracts, such as super priority liens that have priority over mortgages if they're registered correctly, in order to make sure that common expenses are collected on time. It also includes mechanisms for dealing with maintenance, repair, and insurance that would be very difficult to do through contract. And so in order to decide whether to do a condominium, maybe think about your other options. So if your goal is to build a rental property and you just want to lease out those homes, own the land for the foreseeable future, you don't need a condominium. You don't need to subdivide the land at all. You could just keep the parcel the way it is. Another option is a severance consent, typically to the Committee of Adjustments. It's a much faster process. And this might make sense if you just want to divide it into two and you just have, let's say, 2 homes. You could have mutual easements if there's anything shared, cost-sharing arrangements through contract. Plan a subdivision or part lot control exemption bylaw. This might make sense if you have multiple homes that are on one level, not units on top of each other. And the municipality is willing to take on responsibilities of the roadways that might be shared or any parking areas. But if none of those quite fit, then a planned condominium might make sense. So if you're doing a multiplex where you have units on top of each other or stacked townhomes, or if you're doing townhouses where it has to be a private road or laneway, the municipality won't take it over, a planned condominium is probably the right approach. So if you've decided to go ahead with a condominium, what type of condominium are you going to pick? There are different types of condominiums, so picking the right one might make the project make more sense for the end users in how they use it. So the first and the most common is the standard condominium. This is divided into units and common elements. Everything's got to be built out to the point where the architect or engineer can sign off and the surveyor can complete the unit boundary survey. Then they're sold. A phase condominium is a standard condominium except it's done in phases. So this makes sense in a townhouse project, let's say. You want to build multiple townhomes. You can build out a few, register it as a condominium, sell them off, take that money, and then put it into the next batch of homes that you're building, which you would then register as a phase or expansion of the existing condominium. That makes sense if you're doing, let's say, townhomes or any homes that are built as complete buildings. It doesn't make sense if you're building vertically. So whatever you build in one registration has to be able to, be final in case you don't build anything in the future. There are no future phases. And so you can't build up, sell units, and then keep building up. It has to be a completed structure. Next is the common elements, condominium, where there are no units. It's just common elements, and then freehold properties that are known as parcels of tied land that own a common interest in those common elements. And those homes aren't subject to the restrictions under the Condominium Act. So if you want to deal with any appearance or maintenance or repair issues for those, you have to do it through maybe some sort of restrictive covenant setup, homeowners association, or something outside of the condominium setup. A vacant land condominium resembles a planned subdivision where you have a road, there's different homes, but the road, parking areas, or any amenities are privately owned by those owners. They are not municipally run like you wouldn't have in a planned subdivision. And so you'll see this a lot with luxury developments. So you have these estate homes, and there's a private roadway, maybe some other shared areas. Those are almost always vacant land condominiums. For those, just keep in mind that you can't build multiple levels, so no units on top of each other. That's why a common feature is that they are these standalone homes. There could be townhomes, depending on how you register it. And so what you'll often find is that a developer will have land, they'll register as a vacant land condominium, sell off units to different builders, who will then build their own custom homes, subject to any restrictions to make sure that the appearance is the same or similar throughout. Then there's the leasehold condominium, which is quite rare. It deals with condominiumization of the leasehold interest, not the underlying ownership interest. And then lastly, it's a conversion. So let's go back to our rental building example. You've built a rental building. You've decided that now, after having run it for quite a few years, you want to convert it to a condo and sell off the different units. Well, you can do that. That would be an application for conversion. In that case, keep in mind that a lot of municipalities are loath to allow conversions that take away from the rental pool. They don't want existing rentals to be changed to units that can then be owner occupied. So it makes sense to have a discussion beforehand if that's something you're planning in the future. Because you could always condominiumize, own all the units, lease them out for a while, and have that optionality to sell down the road. Okay, so you've decided to go with a condo, you've chosen the type of condo you want, and now you want to go to market. So you want to sign up some buyers to agreements purchase and sale. So what's the process? And so this is assuming that you're doing a new residential home build. So it's the HCRA is the Home Construction Regulatory Authority. They regulate vendors and builders. You need a license before you can sell or build a new home. For Tarion has a two-step process. It's the same for condos. You have qualification for enrollment. So before you can enter into any agreements purchase and sale, you need to have this qualification for enrollment confirmation. And then before you can start construction, the homes need to be enrolled with Tarion. Now, Tarion typically has security requirements. They have a dollar amount that they need you to post. You can typically do that by letter of credit or a bond. In some cases, a deposit trust agreement where the purchaser's deposits are just kept in the lawyer's trust account as the security might be accepted. Depends on what Tarion requires for that project. And then deposits. So deposits are different for condos. The requirement that they stay in the lawyer's trust account unless they're authorized to be released is a Condominium Act requirement. It's not a Tarion or HCRA requirement unless Tarion requires it as part of its security requirements. And so deposits, once received in a lawyer's trust account for a unit or a common interest, if we're talking about a common elements condo, they need to be held in trust unless they're allowed to be released. So either by way of a Tarion deposit receipt for up to the first $20,000, or you can get excess condo deposit insurance to release amounts beyond the first $20,000. And so you'd go to a surety, they would ask for a collateral mortgage on the property, and enter into a priority agreement with your construction lender, just confirming the lender has first position, the collateral is second, but also that the deposits that are in the trust account, the surety is in first position for that and the lender would be in second. That's how it's typically done. One aspect of common elements condos that's made it a bit more popular than you might otherwise see is that because they're freehold homes, the deposits, they don't attract this requirement that they have to be kept in the lawyer's trust account. Remember, that attaches to the common interest. So a clever way of doing it in agreements is to separate those two out, attach a nominal value to the common interest, then have the purchase price attached to the home itself. What I'm finding is that Tarion, through the qualification for enrollment process, is requiring that even sometimes for non-condo projects, that those deposits have to be in the lawyer's trust account until the project's firm, so any early termination conditions are satisfied or waived, or some other benchmark is set. For whatever reason, they're just being a bit more cautious than they have been in the past. Okay, so you want to go to market and get people signed up. What are they actually signing? You're familiar with the agreement purchase and sale. Just note for condos, there are 3 specific forms that have to be included. One is the HCRA condo info sheet. This goes right at the top of the APS, and it's just kind of a snapshot summary of some of the items in the Tarion addendum, like the occupancy dates and any early termination conditions. And then there's the Tarion addendum itself. There are different versions depending on the type of project and the type of condo. And lastly, there's a Tarion warranty information sheet, which just gives a breakdown to the purchaser of the different warranty coverage. And then the disclosure statement is unique to condominiums. And this includes the proposed documents that are going to be registered or passed at the time the condo is created, so purchasers know what they're getting into when they're buying a condo unit. The first is the proposed declaration. This is the constitution, essentially, of the condominium. It, together with the description plans, once registered, create the condominium corporation. And it includes requirements such as maintenance, repair, insurance, etc., that are very difficult to change. You, as the declarant, pretty much set them in stone. They require 80, sometimes 90% of owners, or the owners of the units, to change them. The bylaws, they deal with organizational issues such as how the board of directors functions, officers. It can have standard unit definitions, insurance deductible requirements, cost-sharing agreements, shared facilities agreements. The rules are day-to-day safety and security issues. And then there's the budget statement. So if you're developing a condominium, you need to disclose the projected first-year budget of the condominium expenses. And you're on the hook if there's any deficit for those line items once all is said and done after the first year. It can be set off if the revenue is a bit higher, but keep in mind, if you budget too low and there's a shortfall, you have to pay out of pocket to the condominium corporation after that first year. Indemnity agreements, these will kind of help protect the developer for any ongoing liability that the condo should be taking over. Also, if there are exclusive use common elements, like let's say you have a townhome with an exclusive use backyard, someone wants to install a deck, it's a good idea to have a Section 98 indemnity agreement that could apply to all units so that this registration requirement under the Act is dealt with, and then those requests can be done kind of at the condo and owner level. And then lastly, there's this condominium guide, which is a document that recently has been required to be included to kind of educate buyers. It's this really lengthy form, but it's there if buyers want to learn more about condos before they buy. Now, in terms of smaller condos, one issue that always pops up is, do you hire a property manager or not? And for larger ones, it's easy. You have the property manager. They'll help you create the budget. They'll help with the Schedule D common interest and common expense percentages. But what do you do if you only have, let's say, 4 to 10 units? That's a big expense that is difficult to spread between that few units. And so you could have the board self-manage, but in that case, you'll have to come up with the budget statement and know how to prepare it. If that's not something you're comfortable doing, you could sometimes outsource it to a manager on a consultation basis where they can prepare the budget or kind of get you quotes for what those in the condo industry would charge, and you can put into the budget. Managers, especially since the licensing requirement came in not that long ago, they're in high demand, and it is tough for them sometimes to take on smaller projects. So if you do need help with a manager, maybe consultation would make the most sense. And if you do get a manager involved, and they're going to be the manager of the condo, typically a draft management agreement is included with the disclosure statement. Okay, so now it's actually time to apply for the draft plan of condominium approval itself. So this is to the planning department of the municipal, the municipality that has jurisdiction over giving this type of approval. And so before you actually submit the application, it's a good idea to have a pre-consultation meeting. Meet with planning staff and walk through your project. They might already be familiar with it. If you've gone through the site plan approval process, they could know about it already and be comfortable with it. But this way, you can get a feel for if it's going to be approved, what wrinkles there might be, any issues they might raise. And then once you're comfortable, submit the application, and you have to submit an actual copy of the proposed draft plan, just showing how the units and common elements are going to be subdivided. Once that's submitted, it's circulated by the municipality to commenting agencies within and also external ones. And they provide conditions. So typical ones you'll see are easement requirements, or Bell or Enbridge will have easement requirements that will need to be satisfied in order to get final plan approval. They'll have noise warning clauses or other clauses that they'll want included in the condo documents and the sales documents. So once you've completed construction to the point that you are close to registration, your surveyor's prepared the description plans, you've satisfied the conditions, you then go for final approval and what's called release of the plan for registration. Sometimes you could apply for an exemption to get out of this process altogether. Let's say you've gone through a rigorous site plan approval process, or for whatever reason, your project is simple enough or has been dealt with before that the municipality feels there's no need for additional conditions. You can apply for an exemption, and that is a quicker route to getting registered. And then condominium registration itself, so once the land is actually divided and you can go ahead and sell, this will happen a bit in parallel, at least this first part, and the second one as well, to the previous slide. But basically, your lawyer completes the declaration, they sign the Schedule A legal description, the surveyor completes the description plans, they sign the Schedule C unit boundaries, and that's given to the land registry office for pre-approval. Please keep in mind that for plans of condominium and plans of subdivision, the lands have to be in what's called Land Titles Absolute Plus. So most property is in the land title system now. It's been converted from the registry system. When it did so, it's not automatically in this Land Titles Absolute Plus. It's qualified. There might be some prescribed easements or squatters' rights, any unregistered claims that others might have, that through this conversion process are dealt with. And so your lawyer and surveyor will first check to see if you have Land Titles Absolute Plus, and if not, make sure that's done before registration. And so once you're ready to submit, you just provide the fully signed declaration and description plans to the registry office along with their filing fee. And the architectural and structural plans, so these are kind of the as-built plans that the condo corporation will keep on record. Your surveyor is going to be the one to collect those from the architect and the engineer and make sure those are submitted as well. Okay, so in terms of the sales process, condos are a bit different than freehold homes where you really just have the closing date. With condos, you have what's called an interim occupancy closing. And so it's possible that you might have a condominium that is built, at least in part, where some of the units can be occupied, or maybe it's even built fully, but there's some condition that's outstanding. Someone at the municipality is giving you a hard time. You just can't get the condo registered. Well, it makes sense to allow the buyers to occupy the units. And that way they cover your carrying costs. So they'll pay for the proposed common expenses, proposed property taxes, and interest on the unpaid portion of the purchase price. For final closings, once you're registered and you can go ahead and start selling the units, then your lawyer would typically send out a notice that the condo is registered and fix a closing date. And then you sell the units. Once you've sold a majority of the units, you then have to have what's called a turnover meeting. In order to get ready for that, you create the condominium corporation's organizational documents. It's kind of like their minute book. You appoint a first board of directors that the developer controls. You register the bylaws, pass the rules, etc. When you complete closings, please keep in mind that you have to get partial discharges of any mortgages that are on title. So you'd get a payout statement for the construction loan and make sure that's paid off each time a unit is sold. If you've posted security with Tarion by way of a bond, your surety might require that you keep the net sales proceeds of the last one or sometimes more of the units as collateral. Because remember, the units have been sold, they're no longer any deposits in trust, but there's still that bond that's posted with Tarion. So Tarion won't release all of it at once. They want to make sure that enough time has passed, that the warranty coverage issues have been dealt with, and then they'll likely release it in parts. And then you hold the turnover meeting. Typically, the lawyer chairs it. This just transfers control from the developer, who is the owner of all that land, to now the condo owners. And my last slide is just some general tips and traps or pitfalls to avoid, and especially with smaller condos. One is a planner. If you're going through this for the first time, it's good to have an experienced planner who's been through this before. They're the quarterback of the process. They deal with all the other professionals, the surveyor, the lawyer, the engineer, the architect, to make sure everyone's on the same page and to make sure that things are submitted on time. They are also the ones who typically prepare the draft plan of condominium that you submit with the application. If you're going to do it yourself, you could submit the application yourself, and you could get a surveyor, or sometimes even a planner to just prepare the plan as a one-off. I spoke of it before, but a manager, it's kind of tricky with smaller condos. Again, if you're going through it the first time, it's not a bad idea to have a manager retained. Sometimes I've had them not only on consultation, but they might take over management until just shortly after turnover, just to make sure that all the proper filings are done and the condominium is being run correctly so it's a smooth handoff, no headaches down the road. Then there's the Condominium Authority of Ontario, which was created in 2017, and it's just created an extra layer of requirements. So one is director training. Any director elected or appointed to the board, they have 6 months from that date to do this training. Right now, it's just online modules. You just read the modules. Condominium returns, there are filings that have to be made by the condo, and then various condo forms and ongoing duties. Now, again, if you have a smaller number of units, it might be harder to get a board of directors from those owners. And so part of the struggle is making sure that they have the understanding to be able to take over those duties. And the last thing you want is, if you're doing many, many projects, is to be on the board of each one and kind of guide them through personally. That could be very time consuming. So it's just something to think about for your projects. And just in general, a good way to reduce your costs and make sure you get registered as soon as possible is a repeatable process. And I find that if you're doing a similar type of project, you have kind of the same or similar development team, and you're dealing with the same municipality or the same planning staff, it just goes a lot smoother. Change any of those variables and it could cause a delay. Now, if you have a very unique project, it's in some far-off municipality you've never dealt with, those are the cards you're dealt, and you just want to make sure that as much of this process is known beforehand and everyone's on the same page to limit delays, because even just one cog in the wheel can really slow down the registration process. So that's everything. Thanks for your time.